until it stops spinning, right?
Yeah.
Hello, L1 friends. I'm coming back to you today with some more of Charlotte's Web. We actually didn't get all the way through the chapter last time. Chapter is called Chapter 3, Escape. And hi, how you doing? I'm trying to take my glasses off. They're already off. Not good. So, we're in the middle of the chapter, and it is called Escape. Little Wilbur has gotten out. He is digging up quite a piece of ground in front of him and making a mess. And Mrs. Zuckerman just now noticed him outside of the window. And she immediately shouted for the pig. Homer, she cried. Pigs out! Lurby, pigs out! Homer, Lurby, pigs out! He's down there under that apple tree. Now the trouble starts, thought Wilbur. Now I'll catch it. The goose heard the racket and she too started hollering. Run, 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 downhill, make for the woods, the woods, she shouted to Wilbur. They'll never, never catch you in the woods. The Cocker Spaniel heard the commotion and he ran out from the barn to join the chase. Mr. Zuckerman heard and he came out of the machine shed where he was mending a tool. Lurvy, cute name, huh? The hired hand. He heard the noise and came up from the asparagus patch where he was pulling weeds. Everybody walked toward Wilbur, and Wilbur didn't know what to do. Have you guys ever had that happen? That's pretty scary, right? The woods seemed a long way off. And anyway, he had never been down there in the woods and wasn't sure he would like it. Get around behind him, Lurvy, said Mr. Zuckerman, and drive him toward the barn. And take it easy. Don't rush him. I'll go and get a bucket of slops. Oh, he's going to get a reward for escaping? Cool. The news of Wilbur's escape spread rapidly among the animals on the place. Whenever any creature broke loose on Zuckerman's farm, the event was of great interest to others. The goose shouted to the nearest cow that Wilbur was free, and soon all the cows knew. Let's see. The lambs heard about it from their mothers because the cow had told the sheep. The horses in their stalls in the barn pricked up their ears when they thought they heard a goose hollering, and soon the horses had caught on to what was happening. Wilbur's out, they said. Every animal stirred and lifted its head and became excited to know that one of his friends had gotten free and was no longer penned up or tied fast. Wilbur didn't know what to do or which way to run. It seemed as though everybody was after him. If this is what it's like to be free, he thought, I believe I'd rather be penned up in my own yard. The Cocker Spaniel was sneaking up on him from one side. Mr. Lurvy, the hired man, was sneaking up on the other side. Mrs. Zuckerman stood ready to head him off if he started for the garden. And Mr. Zuckerman was coming toward him carrying a pail. This is really awful, thought Wilbur. Why doesn't Fern come? And he began to cry. Aww. The goose took command and began to give orders. Don't just stand there, Wilbur. Dodge about, cried the goose. Skip around, run toward me, slip in and out, and in and out. Make for the woods, twist and turn. The Cocker Spaniel sprang for Wilbur's hind leg, and Wilbur jumped and ran. Lurvy reached out and grabbed. Mrs. Zuckerman screamed at Lurvy. The goose cheered for Wilbur. Wilbur dodged between Lurvy's legs, and Lurvy missed Wilbur and grabbed the Cocker Spaniel instead. Nicely done, cried the goose. Try it again. Run downhill, suggested the cows. Run toward me, yelped the gander. Run uphill, cried the sheep. Twist and turn, honked the goose. Jump and dance, said the rooster. So here they are, coming up the hill. They're trying to get Wilbur. Here is Lurvy laying on top of the dog, which he tried to grab Wilbur, but instead got the dog. So, wow, what is going to happen to this guy, huh? Look out for Lurvy, called the cows. Look out for Mr. Zuckerman, yelled the gander. Watch out for the dog, cried the sheep. Listen to me, screamed the goose. Poor Wilbur was dazed and frightened. All of this hullabaloo, huh? He didn't like being the center of all this fuss. He tried to follow the instructions his friends were giving him, but he couldn't run downhill and uphill at the same time. He he was he couldn't twist and turn when he was jumping and dancing, and he was crying so hard he could barely see anything that was happening. Poor Wilbur. After all, Wilbur was a very young pig, not much more than a baby, really. He wished Fern were there to take him in her arms and comfort him. When he looked up and saw Mr. Zuckerman standing quite close to him, holding a pail of warm slops. Slops is like scraps and stuff for the pigs to eat. When he saw that, he felt relieved. He lifted his nose and he gave it a little sniff. Smelled delicious. Warm milk, potato skins, wheat middlings, some Kellogg's cornflakes were in there, and a popover left from the Zuckerman's breakfast. Come, pig, said Mr. Zuckerman, tapping the pail. Come, pig. Wilbur took a step toward the pail. No, 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 said the goose. It's the old pail trick. Wilbur, don't fall for it. Don't fall for it. He's trying to lure you back into captivity. He's appealing to your stomach. Wilbur didn't care. The food smelled really good. He took another step toward the pail. Pig, pig, said Mr. Zuckerman in a kind voice, and began walking slowly toward the barnyard, looking all about him innocently, as if he didn't know that the little white pig was following along behind him. You'll be sorry, called the goose. Wilbur didn't care. He kept walking toward the pail of slops. You'll miss the freedom, honked the goose. An hour of freedom is worth a barrel of slops. Wilbur didn't care. When Mr. Zuckerman reached the pig pen, he climbed over the fence and poured the slops into the trough. Then he pulled the loose board away from the fence so that there was a wide hole for Wilbur to walk through. Reconsider, cried the goose. That's a nosy goose, isn't it? Wilbur paid no attention. He stepped through the fence into his yard. He walked to the trough and took a long drink of slops, sucking in the milk hungrily and chewing the popover. It was good to be home again. While Wilbur ate, Lurvy fetched a hammer and some 8-penny nails and nailed the board in place. Then he and Mr. Zuckerman leaned lazily on the fence, and Mr. Zuckerman scratched Wilbur's back with a stick. He's quite a pig, Lurvy. Yes, he'll make a good pig, said Mr. Zuckerman. Wilbur heard the words of praise. He felt the warm milk inside his stomach. He felt the pleasant rubbing of the stick along his itchy back. He felt peaceful and happy and sleepy. This had been a tiring afternoon. It was still only about 4:00, but Wilbur was ready for bed. I am really too young to go out into the world alone, he thought as he lay down. So he had an escape, and it's over. So chapter 4 is going to be about loneliness, it says. The next day was rainy and dark. Rain fell on the roof of the barn and dripped steadily from the eaves. Rain fell in the barnyard and ran in crooked courses down into the lane where the thistles and pigweed grew. Rain spattered against Mrs. Zuckerman's kitchen windows and came gushing out of the downspouts. Rain fell on the backs of sheep as they grazed in the meadow. When the sheep tired of standing in the rain, they walked slowly up the lane into the fold. Rain let's make that stop. Excuse me. Rain upset Wilbur's plans. Wilbur had planned to go out this day and dig a new hole in his yard. He had other plans too, yes. His plans for the day went something like this. Breakfast at 6:30, skim milk, crusts, middlings, bits of donuts, wheat cakes with drops of maple syrup sticking to them, yum, potato skins, leftover custard pudding with raisins, and bits of shredded wheat. Breakfast would be finished at 7. From 7 to 8, Wilbur planned to have a talk with with Templeton, the rat that lived under his trough. He's his own rat. Talking with Templeton was not the most interesting occupation in the world, but it was better than nothing. From 8 to 9, Wilbur planned to take a nap outdoors in the sun. It's my kind of pig. From 9 to 11, he planned to dig a hole or a trench and possibly found something good to eat buried in the dirt. From 11 to 12, he planned to stand still and watch flies on the boards, watch bees in the clover, and watch swallows in the air. 12 o'clock, lunchtime. Middlings, warm water, apple parings, meat gravy, carrot scrapings, meat scraps, stale hominy, and the wrapper off a package of cheese. Lunch would be over at 1. Ooh, that's a whole hour. From 1 to 2, Wilbur planned to sleep. Love it. From 2 to 3, he planned to scratch itchy places by rubbing against the fence. And from 3 to 4, he planned to stand perfectly still and think of what it was like to be alive and to wait for Fern. Oh. At 4 would come supper. Skim milk, provender. I don't know what that is, provender. Leftover sandwich from Larry's lunchbox, prune skins, a morsel of this, a bit of that, fried potatoes, marmalade drippings, and a little bit more of this and a little bit more of that. A piece of baked apple, and a scrap of upside-down cake. Wow. Wilbur had gone to sleep thinking about these plans. He awoke at 6 and saw the rain, and it seemed as though he couldn't bear it. How was he supposed to go out and stand in the sun? I get everything all beautifully planned out, and it has to go and rain. For a while, he stood gloomily indoors. Meh. Then he walked to the door and looked out. Drops of rain stuck on his face. His yard was cold and wet. His trough had an inch of rainwater in it. Templeton was nowhere to be seen. Well, how was he supposed to talk to Templeton then? "Are you out there, Templeton?" called Wilbur. There was no answer. Suddenly, Wilbur felt lonely and friendless. "One day, just like another," he groaned. "I'm very young. I have no real friend here in the barn. It's going to rain all morning and all afternoon, and Fern won't come in such bad weather." Oh, honestly, and Wilbur was crying for the second time in 2 days. At 6:30, Wilbur heard the banging of a pail. Lurvy was sitting outside in the rain, stirring up breakfast. "Come on, pig," said Lurvy. Wilbur did not budge. Lurvy dumped the slops, scraped the pail, and walked away. He noticed that there was something wrong with the pig. Wilbur didn't want food. He wanted love. Oh, he wanted a friend, someone who would play with him. He mentioned this to the goose, who was sitting quietly in a corner of the sheepfold. "Will you come over and play with me?" he asked. Sorry, said the goose. "I'm sitting on my eggs, 8 of them. Got to keep them toasty warm. I have to stay right here. I'm no flibberty gibbet. I do not play when there are eggs to hatch. I'm expecting goslings." "Well, I didn't think you were expecting woodpeckers," said Wilbur. Wilbur tried one of the lambs next. So here he is. He's talking to the lamb. It looks like the lamb is leaving.
A lamb?
A lamb. It's a baby sheep. Yes. Hey. So wait, I'm off it. "Will you please play with me?" he asked. "Certainly not," said the lamb. "In the first place, I cannot get into your pen, as I am not old enough to jump over the fence. In the second place, I am not interested in pigs. Pigs mean less than nothing to me." "Wasn't very nice." "What do you mean, less than nothing?" replied Wilbur. "I don't think there is any such thing as less than nothing." Good argument. Nothing is absolutely the limit of nothingness. It's the lowest you can go. It's the end of the line. How can something be less than nothing? If there were something that was less than nothing, then nothing would not be nothing. It would be something, even though it's just a very little bit of something. But if nothing was nothing, then nothing has nothing that is less than it is. Huh? "Oh, be quiet," said the lamb. "Go play by yourself. I don't play with pigs." Well, sadly, Wilbur lay down and listened to the rain. Soon he saw the rat climbing down a slanting board that he used as a stairway. "Will you play with me, Templeton?" asked Wilbur. "Play," said Templeton, twirling his whiskers. Play? I hardly know the meaning of the word. Well, said Wilbur, it means to have fun, to frolic, to run and skip and make merry. I never do those things if I can avoid them, replied the rat sourly. I prefer to spend my time eating, gnawing, spying, and hiding. I am a glutton, but not a merrymaker. Right now, I am on my way to your trough to eat your breakfast, since you haven't had enough sense to go and eat it yourself. And Templeton the rat crept stealthily along the wall and disappeared into a private tunnel that he had dug between the door and the trough in Wilbur's yard. Templeton was a crafty rat, and he had things pretty much his own way. The tunnel was an example of his skill and cunning. The tunnel enabled him to get from the barn to his hiding place under the pig trough without coming out into the open. He had tunnels and runways all over Mr. Zuckerman's farm and could get from one place to another without being seen. Pretty sneaky, huh? Usually he slept during the daytime and was abroad only after dark. Wilbur watched him disappear into his tunnel. And in a moment, he saw the rat's sharp nose poke out from underneath the wooden trough. Cautiously, Templeton pulled himself up over the edge of the trough. This was almost more than Wilbur could stand. On this dreary, rainy day, to see his breakfast being eaten by somebody else. He knew Templeton was getting soaked out there in the pouring rain, but even that didn't comfort him. Friendless, dejected, and hungry, he threw himself down in the manure and sobbed. Now, this picture goes with that, I think. He's just laying here. If you see well enough, as this has got some little tears coming down his face, and he is just pitifully sad. Poor little guy. Poor you. Ah. So late that afternoon, Lurvy went to Mr. Zuckerman. I think there's something wrong with that pig of yours. He hasn't touched his food. All right, give him 2 spoonfuls of sulfur and a little molasses, said Mr. Zuckerman. Wilbur couldn't believe what was happening to him when Lurvy caught him and forced the medicine down his throat. This was certainly the worst day of his life. He didn't know whether he could endure the awful loneliness anymore. Darkness settled over everything. Soon there were only shadows and noises of the sheep chewing their cuds, and occasionally the rattle of a cow chain up overhead. You can imagine Wilbur's surprise when out of the darkness came a small voice that he had never heard before. It sounded rather thin but pleasant. Do you want a friend, Wilbur? It said. I'll be a friend to you. I've watched you all day, and I like you. But I can't see you, said Wilbur, jumping to his feet. Where are you? And who are you? I'm right up here, said the voice. Go to sleep. You'll see me in the morning. So I'm not sure if we wanted to end on this chapter, because I think there's a little bit of this next chapter that's going to explain that voice. It's chapter 5, Charlotte. The night seemed long. Wilbur's stomach was empty and his mind was full. And when your stomach is empty and your mind is full, it's always hard to sleep, too, huh? A dozen times during the night, Wilbur woke and stared into the blackness, listening to the sounds and trying to figure out what time it was. A barn is never perfectly quiet. Even at midnight, there is usually something stirring. The first time he woke, he heard Templeton gnawing a hole in the grain bin. Good choice. Templeton's teeth scraped loudly against the wood and made quite a racket. That crazy rat, thought Wilbur. Why does he have to stay up all night grinding his clashers and destroying people's property? Why can't he go to sleep like any decent animal? The second time Wilbur woke, he heard the goose turning on her nest and chuckling to herself. What time is it? Wilbur whispered to the goose. Probably about 7:30, said the goose. Why aren't you asleep, Wilbur? Too many things on my mind, said Wilbur. Well, said the goose. That's not my trouble. I have nothing at all on my mind, but I've got too many things under my behind. Have you ever tried to sleep while sitting on 8 eggs? Oh, no, replied Wilbur. I suppose it is uncomfortable. How long does it take a goose egg to hatch? Approximately 30 days, all told, answered the goose, but I cheat a little. On warm afternoons, I just pull a little straw over the eggs and go out for a walk. Wilbur yawned and went back to sleep. In his dreams, he heard again the voice saying, I'll be a friend to you. Go to sleep. You'll see me in the morning. About half an hour before dawn, Wilbur woke and listened. The barn was still dark. Even the goose was quiet. Overhead, the sheep lay motionless. Overhead, on the main floor, nothing stirred. The cows were resting. The horses dozed. Templeton had quit work and gone off somewhere on an errand. The children were all sleeping, all snug in their beds. Wait, no, that's a different book. The only sound was a slight scraping noise from the rooftop where the weather vane swung back and forth. Wilbur loved the barn when it was like this, calm and quiet, waiting for light. Day is almost here, he thought. Through a small window, a faint gleam appeared. One by one, the stars went out. Wilbur could see the goose a few feet away. She sat with head tucked under a wing. There you go. And then he could see the sheep and the lambs, the sky lighted. Oh, beautiful day. It is here at last. Today I shall find my friend. Wilbur looked everywhere. He searched his pen thoroughly. He examined the window ledge, stared up at the ceiling, but he saw nothing new. Finally, he decided he would have to speak up. He hated to break the lovely stillness of dawn by using his voice, but he couldn't think of any other way to locate the mysterious new friend who was nowhere to be seen, so Wilbur cleared his throat. Attention, please, he said in a loud, firm voice. Will the party who addressed me last night at bedtime kindly make himself or herself known by giving an appropriate sign or signal? Wilbur paused and listened. All the other animals lifted their heads and stared at him. Wilbur blushed, but he was determined to get in touch with his unknown friend. Attention, please, he said. I will repeat the message. Will the party who addressed me at bedtime last night kindly speak up? Please tell me who you are, if you are my friend. The sheep looked at each other in disgust. Stop your nonsense, Wilbur, said the oldest sheep. If you have a new friend, you are probably disturbing his rest. And the quickest way to spoil friendship is to wake somebody up in the morning before they are ready. How can you be sure your friend is an early riser? Oh, I beg everyone's pardon, whispered Wilbur. I didn't mean to be objectionable. He laid down meekly in the manure, facing the door. He did not know it, but his friend was very near. And the old sheep was right. His friend was still asleep. Soon Lurvy appeared with slop for breakfast. Wilbur rushed out, ate everything in a hurry, and licked the trough. The sheep moved off down the lane, and the gander waddled along behind them, pulling grass. And then, just as Wilbur was settling down for his morning nap, he heard again the thin voice that had addressed him the night before. Salutations, said the voice. Wilbur jumped to his feet. What? He cried. Salutations, repeated the voice. What are they? And where are you? Screamed Wilbur. Please, please tell me where you are. And what are salutations? Salutations are greetings, said the voice. When I say salutations, it's just my fancy way of saying hello or good morning. Actually, it's a silly expression, and I'm surprised that I've used it at all. As for my whereabouts, that's easy. Look up here in the corner of the doorway. Here I am. Look, I'm waving. Ta-da! What's up there in the corner? Wilbur saw the creature that had spoken to him in such a friendly way. Stretched out across the upper part of the doorway was a big spider web, and hanging from the top of the web, head down, was a large gray spider. She was about the size of a gumdrop, pretty big. She had 8 legs, and she was waving one of them at Wilbur in a friendly greeting. See me now, she said. Oh, yes, indeed, said Wilbur. Yes, indeed. How are you? Good morning. Salutations. Very pleased to meet you. What is your name, please? May I have your name? My name, said the spider, is Charlotte. Charlotte what? Asked Wilbur eagerly. Charlotte A. Cavatica. But just call me Charlotte. I think you're beautiful, said Wilbur. Well, I am pretty, replied Charlotte. There's no denying that. Almost all spiders are rather nice looking. I'm not as flashy as some, but I'll do. I wish I could see you, Wilbur, as clearly as you can see me. Why can't you? Asked the pig. I'm right here. Yes, but I am nearsighted, replied Charlotte. I've always been dreadfully nearsighted. It's good in some ways, not so good in others. Watch me wrap up this fly. A fly that had been crawling along Wilbur's trough had flown up and blundered into the lower part of Charlotte's web and was tangled by the sticky threads. The fly was beating its wings furiously, trying to break loose and free itself. First, said Charlotte, I dive at him. Head first towards the fly, and as she dropped, a tiny silken thread unwound from her rear end. Next, I wrap him up. She grabbed the fly, threw a few jets of silk around it, and rolled it over and over, wrapping it so that it couldn't move. So she's wrapping the fly up there. Oh, wow. Wilbur watched in horror. He could hardly believe what he was seeing, and although he detested flies, felt kind of sorry for this one. There, said Charlotte. Now I knock him out so he'll be more comfortable. Knock him out. She bit the fly. He can't feel a thing now, she remarked. He'll make a perfect breakfast for me. You mean you eat flies? Said Wilbur. Certainly. Flies, bugs, grasshoppers, choice beetles, moths, butterflies, tasty cockroaches, gnats, midges, daddy longlegs, centipedes, mosquitoes, crickets, anything that is careless enough to get caught in my web. I have to live, don't I? Well, yes, of course, said Wilbur. Do they taste good? Delicious, of course. I don't really eat them. I drink them. I drink their blood. I love blood, said Charlotte, and her pleasant, thin voice grew even thinner and more pleasant. Oh, don't say that, said Wilbur. Oh, please don't say things like that. Why not? It's true, and I have to say what is true. I am not entirely happy about my diet of flies and bugs, but it's the way I'm made. A spider has to pick up a living somehow or other, and I happen to be a trapper. I just naturally build a web and trap flies and other insects. My mother was a trapper before me. Her mother was a trapper before her. All of our family have been trappers, and way back for thousands and thousands of years, we spiders have been laying in wait for flies and bugs. It's a miserable inheritance, said Wilbur gloomily. He was sad because his new friend was so bloodthirsty. Yes, it is, agreed Charlotte, but I can't help it. I don't know how the first spider in the early days of the world happened to think up this fancy idea of spinning a web, but she did. And it was clever of her, too. And since then, all of us spiders have had to work the same trick. It's not a bad pitch on the whole. It's cruel, said Wilbur, who did not want to be argued out of his position. Well, you can talk, said Charlotte. You have your meals brought to you in a pail. Nobody feeds me. I have to get my own living, and I live by my wits. I have to be sharp and clever lest I go hungry. I have to think things out, catch what I can, take what comes. And it just so happens, my friend, that what comes is flies and insects and bugs. And furthermore, said Charlotte, shaking one of her legs, Do you realize that if I didn't catch bugs and eat them, bugs would increase and multiply and get so numerous that they would destroy the earth, wipe out everything? Really? Said Wilbur. Well, I wouldn't want that to happen. Perhaps your web is a good thing after all. The goose had been listening to this conversation and chuckled to herself. There are a lot of things Wilbur does not know about life, she thought. He's really a very innocent little pig. He doesn't know what's going to happen to him around Christmas time. He has no idea that Mr. Zuckerman and Lurvy are plotting to kill him. And the goose raised herself a bit and poked her eggs a little further under her so that they would receive the full heat from her warm body and soft feathers. Charlotte stood quietly over the fly, preparing to eat it. Wilbur lay down and closed his eyes. He was tired from his wakeful night and from the excitement of meeting someone for the first time. A breeze brought him the smell of clover, the sweet smelling world beyond his fence. Well, he thought, I've got a new friend all right, but what a gamble friendship is. Charlotte is fierce, brutal, scheming, bloodthirsty, everything I don't like. How can I learn to like her, even though she's pretty and, of course, clever? Wilbur was merely suffering the doubts and fears that often go with finding a new friend. In good time, he would discover that he was mistaken about Charlotte. Underneath her rather bold and cruel exterior, she had a kind heart, and she was to prove loyal and true to the very end. So that is taking us to the end of the chapter about Charlotte, where we meet Charlotte and find out that she's being nice, as it seems, to Wilbur to be his friend, but a little terrifying in the sense that she seems kind of creepy, okay? If you guys met a vampire friend and they're like, oh, yeah, well, got to eat people's blood, you'd be pretty creeped out, right? But still, their friendship is not about what they eat. And she's right. Somebody brings him food all the time. So, he doesn't have to work for it like she does. So, but the important thing is they're becoming friends. And we're going to see where that goes in the next chapter of Charlotte's Web. And right now, there's some basketball excitement going on. Right? So are you going to do something different? Or are we done?
Good. Bye, you guys. See you guys tomorrow.
Yes, I must go. I'm going to start choking. Sorry.